friends, welcome to Carrie's Culinary Crafts, where we talk all things food. And this past weekend, I had a very busy weekend. My granddaughter was here, all of my kids were home, and I was still battling over the cold. I was getting better. Um, so I figured that I would go ahead on this day was actually Saturday, and I felt good enough to make some stuff. So I went ahead this morning and I made two kinds of waffles for my family. I made banana waffles and I made um, pumpkin spice waffles. And no, I did not get tons of footage, but I did get some. It was just very hectic, and my granddaughter was running around and playing hide and seek and all that fun stuff. So I tried to get as much as I could. But basically, both of these recipes is using a basic pancake recipe, which would include 2 cups of flour, 1/4 cup of whatever sweetener you like to use, 1 teaspoon baking powder, half teaspoon baking soda, quarter teaspoon salt, um, and then you would need 3 eggs and 1 1/3 cup milk and 3 tablespoons of oil or butter or whatever you like to use. I personally like to use butter, but you can use whichever one you want to use. Now, that is the basic recipe. Now, in order to make my banana or my pumpkin waffles, the banana's super simple. I just go ahead and add in 2 bananas in with that mix. If it tends to be a little bit wet, then you can go ahead and add a little bit extra flour. I didn't have the problem with this recipe. I used the 2 cups. I used the standard recipe. I smashed in my 2 ripe bananas, and it was a fine consistency. Now for my pumpkin waffles, I do a little bit different. Um, the recipe for most pumpkin waffles really only wants you to add 1 cup of pumpkin in it. I don't like using a partial can. If I'm going to open up pumpkin, I want to use the whole can. So what I do is I will use the whole can, and I will need to add 1 extra cup of flour. So instead of 2 cups of flour, I'm going to add 3 cups of flour into the normal waffle or pancake recipe that you use. So I would add 1 can of the pure pumpkin, and then I would add 1 tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then also for the wet ingredients with the 3 eggs and the milk, I would add 1/4 cup of maple syrup. And with this recipe also, I substitute like whatever type of sugar you're using. I like to put in brown sugar in with the pumpkin spice waffles. I think those flavors just go really well together. So I use the 1/4 cup of brown sugar as the sweetener in the dough. And then with the wet ingredients, I just add an additional 1/4 cup of maple syrup into those pumpkin waffles. Now here I have a waffle iron that I got it from Walmart. I absolutely love this waffle iron. I used to have another one and I absolutely hated it. I would never use it because it was such a pain to clean. But this one that I have here, the waffle irons, you can um, pull them out. You can push a button and they will pop right out, and you can run them through the dishwasher, which makes it a super easy cleanup. So I absolutely love these waffle irons. And like I said, I got it at Walmart, and it was not that expensive at all. Here I'm going ahead and doing my second batch of banana waffles here, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the 2 batches of pumpkin waffles. Now, my one son absolutely loves pumpkin. The other son absolutely despises pumpkin. So that's why I've got two different kind of waffles going on here. And for my granddaughter, I'm not sure which one she's going to like. She'll probably end up liking them both, but we'll find out. But so that is the recipe that I use for my pumpkin waffles and my banana waffles, and I hope you guys will give this a try. I'm sorry I didn't get like a finished um, I didn't get a finished shot of the waffles. Here is the last of the pumpkin waffles coming out. Um, but yeah, if you give this a try, let me know how you like them. They're definitely a hit in my family. Everybody liked them, and my granddaughter did love both the pumpkin and the banana waffles. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get into dinner for Saturday night. And what I made was Salisbury steaks. This is another favorite of ours. And if you remember back in, I believe it's March, I think when I show you this, it has a date on it. Um, the freezer meal that I did for that month was I made a whole bunch of Salisbury steaks, several packages of them to make several meals. And when you do that, it makes the actual cooking of the Salisbury steak so much easier. Yes, here it says 323. I have 8 uncooked Salisbury steaks. So back in March, I made the video, which I will link it below and maybe put an iCard up here that you can click on so you can add it to your feed in order to go check it out. So with the patties already made, and I pulled them out of the freezer so they're nice and thawed now. Now all I have to do is cook them up and then make the gravy, and it makes for a super fast meal. Now basically these are just like burgers, but they have all different kinds of seasonings in them, which makes them the Salisbury steaks. So I went ahead and melted some of my herb butter in there, and then I added 4 of those Salisbury steaks to the skillet. Now I'm going to leave them alone until they are completely seared on the one side. And I'm not going to move them, turn them, anything until they are seared. Because if you do try to move them or anything, they will fall apart. Um, Now I notice with this recipe, I did have one of them that fell apart a lot, which means I probably, because of the fact that of how many I made, I maybe should have added another egg to it. But it wasn't bad. It was just the one kind of fell apart, which was really no big deal. But the others pretty much stayed in patties. So I'm going to go ahead and cook these on the one side, and probably cook it on the one side for about 5 minutes. And then I will flip them over and sear them on the other side, but I will go ahead and put a lid on them for the next 5 minutes. Here I'm showing you my garlic butter cubes. I'm going to pull one of those out because I will be using that for the gravy later. Um, So I'm going to go ahead and flip these. I'm going to put the lid on it, and then I'm going to let them go for another 5 minutes until they get that sear on the other side. Now you don't need to cook them entirely the whole way through because you're going to add them back into the pan once you cook your gravy and thicken your gravy, and you're going to put the lid on and you're going to simmer them for about 10 minutes. So they will completely cook by then, so you won't have to worry about it. Okay, so here I'm flipping them over, then I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to let them go for another 5 minutes or so. Okay, and here I'm just flipping them over just to make sure that they are good and seared on both sides. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove these from the pan and get the other 4 in the pan and get them seared on both sides as well. Okay, I'm making sure to get all those little bits out of there, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in my other 4 patties to get them seared on both sides. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the first ones. For about 5 minutes, I'm going to leave them on one side, leave them alone, don't move them around, and then I will, once the sear is on the one side, I will flip them over and sear them on the other side. And then I will get them removed from the pan. Here I'm going to go ahead and flip them over because they are nice and seared on the one side. And I will just follow that process. Once I flip them over, I'm going to put the lid on them and leave them alone for another 5 minutes to get them fully seared on the second side. Okay, so now they are seared on the other side, and I'm going to go ahead and remove them from the pan. Now, once I remove these from the pan, I am not going to want to remove that butter and that grease that is in there, but I will want to scrape anything that is sticking off the bottom because we're going to make a gravy, and you definitely don't want to have a burnt taste in your gravy. So once I get all of these bits out and the Salisbury steaks out, I'm going to scrape up the bottom, and then I'm going to get rid of any of those solid things that are left in the pan. But I'm going to go ahead and leave the butter and the grease in the pan. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in that other cube of herb butter and get that melted down so we can go ahead and start making some gravy. Now, if you notice, there's a small saucepan just on the other side of this big pan. I didn't get myself filming it, but what I did is in that pan I put in 1 pint jar of beef bone broth, and then I put in 1 cup of flour, and I got that whisked up really good. It is actually not on the heat. I was going to heat it up, and then I thought, why would I do that? I'm just going to dump it in this pan. So I just went ahead and dumped the pint of bone broth in there, the cup of flour, and I gave it a really, really good whisk to make sure that that flour completely dissolved. Now back to this pan. I'm waiting until this this butter melts, and then I'm going to add a cup of flour to this. And then I'm going to get that whisked around really good. And I realize I need my silicone whisk. I don't want to mess up this pan. So I got my silicone whisk, and I'm whisking this around really good. Now you want to cook the flour for at least 1 to 2 minutes in that butter before you do anything, because that cooks the flour taste out of the butter. So I'm just going to sit here and whisk it for a while and let that bubble for 1 minute to 2 minutes. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and add in my beef bone broth along with my flour that is in the other pan. And then I'm going to whisk that until it comes up to a boil. Once it comes up to like a boil, I will turn the heat way down to keep it at a simmer, but it's going to thicken up instantly. And sometimes you might have to add extra milk, which you will see that I will need to do. You could add water if you want. I believe I added milk. See, there's the bone broth, and then there was some flour in there. So I'm going to go ahead and dump this into the pan now that it's been a couple of minutes that flour has cooked, so that flour taste will dissipate. Okay, and here I go. I added in that beef bone broth and some flour. And I'm going to add in some seasonings here in a little bit. I didn't add anything in with my bone broth. I just keep it just plain and simple. I let the beef and the bones flavor that broth. But once I get this in here and I'm whisking it really nice, I'm going to bring it back up to a boil. And like I said, once it comes up to a boil, it's going to thicken immediately because there is, like I said, there's like 2 cups of flour in here with all of that bone broth and then all of that grease and my herb butter mixture. Okay, as you can see, it's starting to thicken up. I did go ahead and add just a little extra water. Okay, so I added water, I did not add milk. And gave that another little whisk. And I can tell that it's still a lot thicker than what I want it to be. With Salisbury steaks, I prefer it to be a little bit of a thinner gravy. Now, if you want it thicker, by all means, you can keep it thicker. But I usually like to make mine a little bit thinner because what I will do is I put my Salisbury steak patties over a pile of mashed potatoes, and then I make sure that there's enough gravy to cover both of them. And then I always serve it with corn because my kids love to mix all of that together and eat it all together, the corn, the mashed potatoes, and the Salisbury steak with gravy. So even after I probably put in like half a cup of water there, and then I seasoned it with salt and pepper. I'm giving it a taste here to see how it tastes. And I needed a little extra salt, so I went ahead and added that. And if I'm correct, I think I did get some more water because I think it still continued to thicken up more, and I still wanted it, a little bit less. I wanted it a little thinner than what it was. So I think all in total, I ended up adding like 1 full cup of water. Because each time I filled it up with about a half a cup of water. Okay, and now that I have it the thickness that I want, I'm going to go ahead and add my Salisbury steaks back into this gravy. And I'm going to make sure that I cover each patty up with that gravy when I put them in. Then what I'm going to do is once I have all these patties in there, I'm going to put the lid on, I'm going to turn it down, I'm going to let it simmer for 10 minutes. That way if the Salisbury steaks weren't completely cooked through, then they will finish cooking through during this process. And they'll be cooking and bubbling in with that gravy, and it's going to turn all into yummy goodness. So I'm going to go ahead and put those all in, and I have it on simmer, and I'm going to let it go for 10 minutes. Once that 10 minutes is done, I just turn it off and I just leave it on my stove until we are all ready to eat, because it will stay warm on that burner with that lid on for a good half hour at least. But I think it was only sitting there for about 15 minutes or so, and everybody decided that they were hungry, so we went ahead and had our Salisbury steak dinner. And like I said, I apologize, I do not have the final footage of this. It was just crazy with everybody around. I just kept forgetting to turn on the camera. I tried to get as much as I could, but I will remember to leave the recipe linked below for the Salisbury steaks that I did in March. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, friends.